We'll begin with lesson number 3 in this Jewpernatural class. And as we had finished last week was all about astrology and the ending point that truly everything that we do is not because it's been determined to us and for us, but actually one of the beautiful teachings that Judaism preaches is that our actions actually can cause changes in the heavens as well. Today, we're going on to, now that we talk about how powerful we are, let's talk about how powerful we really are. Curses, does that have any effect when we curse someone? The evil eye, if we just steer someone down and however each one of us use the evil eye, if we do, how powerful is that? Is that something we have to be worried about? And I do want to begin, I think that when you look through history and you talk about God cursed the serpent, we can start right in the beginning of Bereshit, right in the beginning of Genesis, and we talk about the power of the curse. We also have King David, who was also cursed by an enemy. We have very famous Romeo and Juliet, two families that curse each other, and it becomes the rivalry, the plague of both houses, I think. Harry Potter, I went to Universal Studios with my kids and just was having fun with them with the wand, What can this do? If you're in Universal, it does a lot. When you hit the traffic signal and you try to change it, it doesn't work. But the fact is this idea of curses wreaking havoc is very fascinating, as much as it is as well ancient. And so the question is, what does the Jewish tradition say about it? What do we really believe? Should we be worried if someone says, I'm cursing you? Or should we just shrug it off because we are Superman or whatever else? And the same thing is, of course, with the evil eye. So we're going to use the class to talk about the curse and the evil eye as kind of two functions of the same idea. One is verbal, one is with our eyes. And so can my look, an envious look or an angry look at someone, really cause someone harm or not? And if it can, which I think one of the bigger question is, let's say it can I shield myself from it? Is that something that I can actually protect myself from someone else's curse or gaze? And so we're going to explore that this evening. But I do think that it is important before we go anywhere to really talk about the legends of curses that have to do with sports. And so, I always grew up with the curse of the Bambino, but we're going to read a text about the curse of Billy Goats. Yeah. So we'll start with text number 1, just to really talk about this idea of curses. So Jody, I'll start on my left. Right. Text number 1, we're on page 81 in the book.
The curse of the Billy Goat. What is the story behind the curse of the Billy Goat? Legend has it that a Chicago tavern owner named Billy Goat Cianis pronounced a curse on the club on October 6, 1945, just a month after the end of World War II. Cianis went to Wrigley to cheer on his beloved Cubs against the Detroit Tigers in the World Series, according to the tavern website, which dedicates a page to the Billy Goat curse. For Game 4, he purchased a ticket for himself and one for his pet goat Murphy, thinking it would bring the Cubs luck. But ushers stopped Cianis from entering with Murphy. Cianis appealed directly to the club owner, P.K. Wrigley, asking him why he couldn't take his personal mascot to the game. Because the goat stinks, Wrigley replied, according to the Billy Goat Tavern. So Cianis threw his arms up and cursed the team. The Cubs ain't gonna win no more, he declared. When the Cubs lost the series to the Tigers, Cianis sent Wrigley a telegram. Who stinks now?
So who does stink now, huh? So, of course, like every story like this, there are always going to be two different reactions, like mine, which would be, I'm a skeptic. It's like, yeah, right, just play better, as they say. And then there are those that take it very seriously. I was with somebody on Sunday, a Sephardic family, and I asked her, because I knew I was already preparing this, and I was reading through the text, and I said, I know that you probably have some things that you come from Morocco. There's got to be certain things that you do because of traditional worries about the evil eye or the curse. And she's like, no, not really anything. And then she remembers she has a family member that has come to her house multiple times with some sort of a I don't know, incense or something, and literally walks through the whole house so that all this smoke can be in every single room.
The saging.
The saging, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, her husband doesn't like it. So there would be this whole like trick. He had to be out of the house when they did it, but obviously there's no way to hide that. When he would come back in, he smelled it. So there are people who do things to ward off the evil eye or to fend off the curse. And our class today is going to talk about both of these things. We're going to talk about curses. We're going to talk about the evil eye. And the truth is that society is a good tell that there are plenty of people who don't believe in it. But if we just focused on sports, I mean, that is a perfect example of where people are so superstitious and careful, and you don't shave, you don't walk over the line, for those of you who do follow all of this. And so they attach a lot of importance to these types of things. And we're really not going to talk about superstitions today. That's totally not this subject. But the idea of actionable ways that people are worried about something, whether it's the evil eye or a curse that someone has given, and how they can ward it off. And so I think just on the Jewish side, a lot of us have ideas about that, but I just want to direct everyone's attention to that very large Hamsa in the corner. I mean, clearly we have this in our tradition. I'm sure someone here probably has a necklace on you. You do? Okay. You have it on the earring. Okay. So it's clearly something that we use them because we know they're Jewish symbols, or we're using it because it's actually something we're worried about. And so here is something I found that was quite fascinating. Just if you want to look, it's on page 82. I'm going to have it on the screen as well. Belief in negative effects of curses and the evil eye. Okay. So America, 16%. We're clear. I guess when you talk about sports, that probably hits way higher, but just standard Americans who are surveyed, 16% believe in the effects of curses and the evil eye. In the United Kingdom, 13%. In France, 20%. And I love this one. Russia, 56%. I don't know what they're eating over there, but clearly they are so much more worried about the spiritual. And I don't know if that's a religious thing. I mean, I wouldn't say Russia would ever be pointed to as a religious country because of all the communism. So something within their families and the way they were brought up is very worried. I mean, I have to ask I would assume my grandparents would fall into that somewhere. Yeah. Also Russian. So we're going to not worry about what everyone else says today, but really talk about the Jewish perspective on this. And can people's lips or eyes harm us or someone else? And so we'll begin on page 83 with text 2 with exploring this exact question from 2 different Jewish sources. One of them is the source that both of them actually are sources that we've been using. And as I was studying this, there's a theme, by the way. When you start seeing the different texts of the different scholars that they're quoting, there's a theme. Like if somebody didn't believe in the astrology issues, they probably aren't worried about this, but also how they characterize this, kind of how I've been appreciating the text, and I'll try to highlight that. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is cursing. The Torah clearly, not like around the bush, forbids cursing another person. But how the Torah tells us this prohibition is very fascinating. I think there's something to be studied from it. So we'll begin with text number 2. Bruce will go.
We begin our study by exploring the question of the effectiveness and potency of curses and evil eyes, as discussed in Jewish sources. 2 very different Jewish perspectives will emerge.
And you can do text 2.
Do not curse a deaf person.
All right, so we're going right into the Torah's text, Leviticus. Do not curse a deaf person. Why is the Torah telling us not to curse a deaf person? Why doesn't it say? Exactly. So it should just say, do not curse a person. Why are we choosing a deaf person who doesn't hear? So there are some people that might immediately say, why can't you curse someone? It's not that the curse has any effectiveness, but rather, if I hear someone curse, there's an emotional hurt. There's anxiety that comes from it. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. So the Torah says, do not curse a deaf person. It tells us even a deaf person who can't hear this curse, you can't curse, right? They're not going to have the emotional issues or the anxiety because they didn't hear anything. Even that person you can't curse. So it's not about emotional pain is really what the verse is coming to tell us. So what is it about?
They can't defend themselves.
To the curse? Okay, I like how you're thinking. So just to repeat that, we're going to go with the idea that curses work. And the reason why it's specifically stating a deaf person is because they didn't know that they were cursed to do whatever, thing we had to do. You want to add something to that? Which is why you shouldn't curse them. Because they don't know about it, they can't ward it off. That's what you're answering, correct?
Right.
Oh, okay, so you're saying if they can't hear it, it doesn't work. But technically, we're not saying that yet, at least from the verse, right? The verse is just saying you can't curse a deaf person. It doesn't tell us if curses work or not, right? So in Torah study, I don't mean like the external Torah study, but in the way the Torah uses its system of laws and sometimes how it teaches a law, sometimes it will tell us the more lenient or the thing that we would think is less, we should be less worried about. And if that's forbidden, how much more so everything else? So this is maybe the logic here. Why is it saying the deaf person? If a deaf person who can't hear and we don't have to worry about it, for sure, somebody who could hear, you shouldn't. That's one way of teaching it. But here, from the verse, we don't learn if the curse works, right? We just know that even a deaf person who can't hear it and therefore might not have any issue from it, even that person you can't curse. So what's the reason then for the prohibition? Is it because cursing works? Or is it because it doesn't work, but we just want you to be a good person. Don't curse people. Yeah.
That a deaf person is probably the easiest person to curse because they can't hear you. And so you can get out all your frustration. But the Torah says, just don't let it out of your mouth. It's for the person. It's not for the recipient.
Okay, I like that. I mean, we will talk Maimonides' text, and he's going to use that theory, but I think really go bigger. But yeah, there's, it could be it's just about character, right? Don't curse people. Yes, and then I'll take it.
It degrades the person who's doing the cursing. He lowers himself.
Right, you're saying it's
or
kind
herself
of like when you
in
see
the
someone.
eyes of Hashem.
Okay, so what you're adding is we see this, I think, quite often. You see somebody who uses foul language. I'm not even talking about cursing people, but the way that people speak tells us a lot about a person. So if they curse at people or cuss at people, to use the difference in that, we would definitely say that the person is not such a great guy or maybe of good character, if I can use that. You want to add something?
It's not fair, is how I'm looking at it. It's more or less cowardly to curse a deaf person.
Is that what you were saying, Jeff, kind of?
Because
Okay.
there's no conversation. And it's lowering the person who's doing it as well, but also it's not right. You're doing something to someone who's defenseless.
Right. So, and defenseless could be just even on cursing back at you,
Right.
right? Not because it works, but to like defend their own.
Or say, why are you doing this? They're not even.
Right,
to do it.
right. Okay, so I like all these thoughts. They're not wrong or right. In the sense of this verse right now, we don't have enough. The verse is very simple and short. And so because of that, we have commentaries that analyze, right? If it was so simple, we wouldn't need the commentaries on this. So on the one hand, the way that we're looking is it should really say, do not curse even a deaf person.
When I read it.
Yeah.
It says do not curse a deaf person. Then I thought, is it okay to curse and not deaf person?
No, of course. By the way, that's part of the question. So that's what I was saying earlier, that in the Torah's kind of teaching is like, if this person you can't curse, for sure not someone who can hear a curse.
If you curse a person that's deaf, they don't know who's standing around.
Okay.
Right.
And yes, before I take these last two, but just to kind of wrap up, the point here is that if it was about emotional pain, then we don't have to worry about deaf people. So it's clearly not about emotional pain, right? The verse wouldn't have chosen the deaf person. Now you want to add something.
I want to add, whatever theory you use, if you think about Yiddish, there are the craziest,
Correct,
funniest
curses.
So how did that come about?
Just see, that's, by the way, just a great point for those of you who are into Yiddish phrases and curses. I actually was looking right before I got here. My mother-in-law once shared with me a lot of phrases that her grandmother used, and I thought hopefully some of them were cursing people. But honestly, from her mother's phrases, I couldn't find a single curse, which is quite impressive. But I did hear a Yiddish curse say is like somebody should be buried like an onion, right? So the
Get Sibylla mit deinem Kopf in Bett.
exactly your head underground and your feet in the air, exactly. So there are some very wild Yiddish curses. Yes.
For me, I would add that the reason it doesn't say even a deaf person.
Right.
Is because hearing is not the only way that the deaf person can find out that he or she has been cursed. They can be written to or communicated with in other ways by other people who someone even mentioned this.
Right, or
before,
somebody heard it and told
heard it
them.
and, rumor and so on.
They can read lips too.
They can read lips.
Right, but we're talking about where they wouldn't have known at all. So it's not like where they saw the, you're doing, it's kind of like cursing someone behind their back.
And I just want to add my favorite Yiddish curse from my uncle Willie. So sollen Sie wissen von meiner Gehackte.
They should know of all my problems. Got it.
You should only know and
It's like
really the
drawing.
implication feel
All right,
from all of my chopped up trouble.
all right. So the question, of course, is what is the reason for this prohibition? If it's not about emotional pain, why is the Torah saying you cannot curse someone? Yes.
I'm wondering, are all curses spoken?
Okay, that's a great question. And I think that's a great question. And I think that regardless, it's still going to fit to this class, which is kind of like how they're looking at curses in general. So if you didn't hear that question, are we only dealing with spoken curses? And if I said that the evil eye is like a curse, then clearly we're including it by including both of these subjects together. So text number 3. Felix, you're up. It's on page 84.
84. Okay. We cannot understand the mechanism through which the curse affects the subject and how words have this power. But we know that all people, both Jews and non-Jews, take curses seriously and believe that even the curse of an ordinary person has an effect on the subject, bringing misfortune and distress. Knowing that this is the case, we can suggest that this is a reason for the transgression. God is forbidding us from causing damage to others with our lips, just as he forbids us from damaging them with our actions.
So this text, the Sefer HaChanoch as it is known, is a work that goes through every single commandment in the Torah. We do not know who the author is, but it is a book that is respected and used as a Jewish source. And so he writes something I think is quite fascinating. He says, I don't know how this works, but I know it works. And therefore, we have to be wary of it and be aware of it. And so a curse can translate into damage. It can translate into hurting someone. And so therefore, even though he doesn't know how it works, and he just says it's an accepted thing that we throughout the ages have agreed that curses work. And so even though he can't explain it, he does explain why this verse said, do not curse the deaf, right? Even though the deaf person would be totally unaware of the curse. Whereas if I heard a curse to me, directed at me, I would know, and I can then go and figure out how to protect myself. This person who is free of any emotional anxiety from being cursed, it's a real curse. It's tangible. It will have an effect, and that will harm this person. So therefore, even the deaf who can't hear the curse will be affected by that curse as well. And so do not curse the deaf either.
How powerful is the curse? Whether you hear it or not, if it's powerful.
It's
You don't need to
powerful.
hear it.
Exactly. Is that a question, or it's just powerful?
Yeah,
But this is only one perspective. right? This is the perspective of the author of the Sefer HaChinuch, this text that we just shared, that curses are real. And therefore, first of all, think about how powerful we are. That's what I look at this like, wow, we should start flexing. But but he doesn't explain how it happens. Now, the question is, does everyone agree with this idea that curses are truly powerful, that you can, the spoken word can cause something to happen? It's not like Matilda or anything like that. Like, do our curses have that much power? So we're going to jump into text 4, which is Maimonides. And Maimonides is, I'm going to say, I told this to my brother, I said, he's the skeptic. He's the skeptic in all of the subjects that we've had so far. He's been the skeptic. And he's like, what do you mean? Maybe he's the realist, right? So text number 4.
One may have thought that the reason we are forbidden from cursing our fellows is because when they hear the curse, they will be pained and distressed. According to this logic, cursing deaf people should not be forbidden because they will never hear the curse and be distressed by it. The Torah, however, disabuses us of this notion and cautions us that cursing deaf people is also forbidden. The reason for this prohibition is that the Torah is not only concerned with the feelings of the subjects of the curse, but with the character of the cursor as well. We are cautioned not to incite ourselves to revenge or accustom ourselves to expressing anger.
So Maimonides, the realist or the skeptic, whichever category you want to put him into, he says something very clear. He says curses damage the character of the person who is cursing. And so he never mentions in this text, if you notice, any talk about a tangible harm that the curse will cause. He only mentions that the person themselves are affected. The person who curses is affected by the curse, not the person who is cursing, the subject of the curse. So it's clear that he doesn't consider or worry about curses and the effect of the curse. So we have 2 sources here, Maimonides and the Sefer HaChinuch, this text. I want to just share something that Maimonides shared in a previous class I think is appropriate to kind of mention here as well. You look through the Talmud, you look through some of the stories in the Torah, and we talk about curses that are effective. So how would he answer or explain why does this rabbi say it works? Why does that rabbi say it works? And why does that rabbi share a story of a curse? And the answer that he gave in a previous class was those are individual opinions. Those are not the Jewish perspective. Those individual rabbis had those opinions. And so there might be other ways of interpreting those very same stories. And if it was up to him, he might give his own interpretations. But the idea is he's more than just saying his own opinion. He has an answer why others disagree. Now we're going to turn to the evil eye. So just to look at this, how this class is kind of, I'm going to say the way this class is set up is that first we talk about what are they, then we talk about their mechanisms, then we'll talk about how we can, I'm going to say, protect ourselves or not worry about them. So right now we're just establishing what is this curse that we're referring to? Who would be worried about it? Is it something we actually have to worry about or not? So now we'll move on to the evil eye.
So that if somebody curses, let's say this is somebody, whatever.
Tell us. I'm just joking.
I don't understand what that means. Like,
So I guess we don't have to worry about you. It's not your mechanism. But yeah, obviously it's like certain people that this is their thing. They're always cursing people, and others it's just not how they talk about people. Yes, Izzy.
The difference between curse and the self-fulfillment.
Is there a difference between a curse and thou shall not bear false witness?
Yeah.
Explain.
What is a curse? Well, saying something to a person that's probably false.
Well, okay, oh, I see what you're saying. I look at one as future, one as past. That's how if I, just to use your two examples, false witness or false testimony and cursing someone. I curse someone, I want something to happen to you. False witnesses, I said something happened to you, or, and typically, exactly. But the curse could also be, it could end up being nothing, but if I had my way and I curse somebody, I want that to happen to them. I want their head to be in the ground and their feet above the ground, right? Whatever it is. So we'll move on to text number 5. Now we're talking about the evil eye.
Rabbi Yeshua said, an evil eye, the evil inclination, and the hatred.
So powerful words, right?
Yeah.
An evil eye, an evil inclination, and the hatred of one's fellows drive a person from the world. And I want to use a translation here that they drive a person from the world means that they lead a person all the way to death. Right? Now, obviously, in extreme circumstances. Not always does an evil inclination do that. Not always does an evil eye do that. And not always does hatred cause that. But we can point to people who have literally been eaten up inside from envy, from their conscience just trying to tell them to do something more and more. Just it causes suicide. We know that. I am not a doctor, but I can promise you that this is something that you deal with on a constant basis.
Absolutely.
So it's a fact that people want instant gratification. There are so many things that eat people and lead them to destruction. So the fact is we're going to talk about the evil eye in just a moment, but if any of these things are left unchecked and you don't seek help or guidance, that's what it will lead to. Hatred does that to people. You hate someone so much. I think that when you talk about now with teenagers and what goes on in a lot of the schools, whether it's through social media, whether it's through all the different messaging apps where people are bullied or hated. I mean, the fact is that these things lead to destruction of people, whether it's to death or internally. But we know that society without that would be a much calmer and kinder society. But we're going to talk about the evil eye. So what does it mean that the evil eye can lead someone to destruction, to death? So one of the commentaries that we've quoted in the past, he had an entire thing on dreams, which is Rabbi Shimon the Rashbatz. I'm going to use the acronym for his name. He lived in Spain, North Africa, and in North Africa in the 14th and 15th centuries. He writes in his commentary 2 interpretations of the evil eye. And so we'll read that in text number 6. Yeah. Page 86.
So evil eye means greediness. Being greedy can drive people from this world because obsessive pursuit of wealth can lead people to place themselves in dangerous circumstances. I disagree with this explanation. The Talmudic definition of evil eye is well known. It refers to looking at a fellow's property with jealousy or hatred, which causes material damage to the person.
So first of all, it's not so common that you see a commentary write someone else's commentary, like their opinion, and say, I disagree. But he does share it. Why? I'm not sure if that was just to give people who are reading his commentary the full picture, or Maimonides was obviously a force to be reckoned with in his opinions. And so he's going to quote him. So what is Maimonides' opinion about the evil eye? He says, again, it is about the person themselves, that greediness is a cause of internal damage. When I have the evil eye and I am greedy, it causes damage to the person themselves. But he disagrees with that. Right? Obsessive pursuit of wealth, I'm just quoting Maimonides again, can lead, or in the text, can lead people to place themselves in dangerous circumstances. And we know that to be very true. Money and people who go after money make a lot of questionable decisions, and then they need lawyers, if they're lucky to be alive from those questionable decisions. So that's one side. But then we look at his own interpretations. He says, no. The evil eye, the way you see it in all the different stories in the Talmud, is the evil eye that we all walked into the room thinking what it meant. It's like some person who gazes at someone and wants damage, whatever it is, they want ill to someone else, whether it's through envy or whatever reason. And so, according to the Rashbats, this rabbi, the evil eye causes harm to its subjects. But the fascinating thing is, he says it also causes a problem to the person who does look at someone with an evil eye, which we will talk about. Right? I'm calling it a boomerang. So in addition to you throwing it at somebody else, it comes back at you. We'll talk about that when we talk about its mechanisms. But again, what is the evil eye according to this commentary? It's something that a person looks at somebody else with the intent of ill will, if I can use that word. And if you think about it, that's really how the historical Jewish context always looked at the evil eye. So if you want to look on page 88, I'm just going to go through some of these, but of course you can read them at your own leisure. So the different ways that we have seen throughout history that we care about the evil eye. So number one is Hagar, which is Abraham's second wife. So Sarah can't have a child. She says, you know what, why don't you have a child with my maidservants? Now, what does she do? It says that she becomes pregnant. And then Sarah's upset. Why? Not because she's upset she's pregnant. She starts treating Sarah disrespectfully. And so it says that Sarah has I'm just gonna read the quote. She says, "Let God judge between me and you." And the Medrash, the commentary over there says, what was she really saying? She was casting an evil eye on that pregnancy. What happens? She miscarries. Later, she does have a child. That is the child that we are all familiar with, Ishmael. But again, this is a context of a simple quote that says she is putting an evil eye on Hagar. Another very known one is when the brothers go down to Egypt, they need food, it's a famine. And there are two things that they talk about this, by the way, with the evil eye. Number one is it says that really the famine doesn't affect Joseph's brothers, but they said, if we don't go, what are people going to say about us? We're here, the whole world is having a famine, and we're just sitting in our little city enjoying life. So they decide to go down to Egypt to be like everyone else. But their father says, don't be obvious. Don't show people that you're coming down to Egypt. So what do? Don't be somebody who arouses the evil eye. They walk in through different gates. Right? They go in through different entrances to the country of Egypt to avoid the evil eye. But what happens? Joseph knows that they're there, and he looks at each gate and says, you, and you all come here. Which reminds me of a story with my father when he went to Russia in the 1980s. So he's a rabbi. He went with another rabbi, and they pretended to be tourists. And so one of the things that they did was they also went into two different customs lines. My father always says, he says, they literally in the hall before you get to the customs counter, they went, you and you come here. Guess they didn't stick out like tourists. Another thing is that you find constantly that the Jewish people are told to be as many as the fish. Why fish? Because fish are protected from the evil eye. That is the tradition. They are underneath the water. The evil eye doesn't affect them. And if you look, I'm just going to highlight one more, or actually two more. King David, we are all familiar with the fight with Goliath. And we're always told that what did he show up with? Just stones and a slingshot. But the story actually says that when they found out that he was ready to fight, so King Saul put his armor on him. And you can read this again. I'm not taking anything that's not on the paper. What happens? The armor fits perfectly. And he notices that King Saul is perturbed by that. He doesn't like that. And so the way he looked at it is King Saul put an evil eye on him. So he says, you know what? He got the hint. He's like, you know what? I don't really need this. This doesn't fit. He was afraid of it. So he fights without armor. The last one is a Jewish traditional thing, which I'm going to talk about on the next page as well. And that is David's mistaken count. One of the things that we find in Judaism is that throughout all the different censuses, we're always worried about the evil eye for head counts. We don't do head counts. King David asks for a head count. He wants all the Jewish people counted. His own general says, hey, that's not a good idea. But he does it anyways. And then he says, you're right, I have sinned. He realizes I did something wrong. Why? Because the head count brings upon a divine punishment. So I want to share how that plays out, counting in Judaism. If anyone here has been to a minyan where they said they're trying to figure out if there are 10 people, and they say not one, not two, not three. Anyone here heard of this?
Yeah.
Yes. That is because we don't count people, because we don't want to bring about the evil eye. So I'm just putting that out there. Some other things that play out in Jewish law with the evil eye, and I don't know, again, just another thing, you tell me if you're familiar with it or not. You go to shul, 2 people are called up to the Torah. They never call up 2 siblings right after each other. If they do, you don't have to tell me what congregation that is. But the point is, traditionally, you don't do that. However, there's nothing wrong with it. There is no law that says you can't have a brother called up after a brother or a child after their father, but we don't do it because of the evil eye. Why?
What's the evil eye gonna do?
Maybe we're the stature, 2 prominent people. Now we have to be worried. Maybe someone's going to look like.
Is that the same thing as when you say in Yiddish, don't give me a kanahara?
Yes. And we'll talk about that. So kinahara, if I'm using your pronunciation of it, is really 3 words. Kain, ayin, hara. Evil eye. The evil eye in Hebrew is an ayin hara. So we'll get to that. We will talk about that. Just by raise of hands here, who here is worried in general or would take it seriously if somebody cursed you to your face? A curse like the onion,
Yeah.
I'm saying like where somebody really has something at you and curses you or your family or something like that. You would take it seriously? What about the evil eye? Are you concerned about the evil eye? I know you're wearing a chamtza, and other people sometimes wear a mezuzah and different. Is that because you're worried? By raise of hands, you don't have to give me your opinion. So, Benita, you're the only one. Oh, is he?
My mother always had a red ribbon around the crib.
Yeah.
So she was worried about it, but are you worried about it?
I did it because.
She did.
Like,
You're right
And I had the red ribbon from.
from your
Yeah.
mother.
My mother's mother, my bubby, she was from a shtetl near Warsaw.
Okay.
And she told me a story, and from her story, I think she believed that the evil eye and curses only worked if it was a witch that gave the curse or the evil eye. So
Got
she
it.
told me about in their shtetl.
There was a witch.
There was a witch, and they know that she was a witch because she would change into a black cat. And this witch,
This was her.
this is.
Don't
not-
worry, you have to take every story. If you remember the last 2 weeks, every story at face value, okay? Until you don't.
And this witch cursed someone, and this person became very ill. So they brought in the rabbi, and the rabbi did a couple of things. And the man, I don't know if it was a man or a woman, the cursed person threw up air and felt better after that. So it broke the curse.
So by the way, if I want to be Maimonides for just a moment, I would say that he wasn't feeling well because he swallowed hair. Right, I would be but people cared about these curses, which is regardless if the story is true or not. The point is, no, and I appreciate that because clearly it was your mother or your grandmother?
My buddy.
Your grandmother grew up really believing this and would totally be worried. By the way, I want to just share something because you said a witch. In Yiddish, or at least in some of the circles here, how do they call like some person who they hate? They say a machashefa. What does that mean? A witch. Like the people they didn't like were a witch. But they were also afraid of those people.
Yes.
Yes.
I was also under the impression, I have no idea where it came from, that the average person couldn't curse another person. Like you had to go to someone with special power
Like somebody with a voodoo doll or something.
On someone, like I never.
Well, isn't that amazing? You came to this class, which is, it's pretty cool. I like hearing that. So, wow, I didn't have to go to that person. We have the power, right? I didn't need to pay someone. They were just milking us, you know? But again, I do want to go back to, you asked about Kainahara or Kinahara. We'll jump into text 7. The most obvious and well-known expression of traditional Jewish belief in the evil eye is that quote that you mentioned, right? So many people say that, which is, a lot of us don't know what we're saying, but we're saying it. But really what you're saying is you don't want the evil eye. That's the literal translation. That's gonna,
Spitting the.
that's gonna be, that's part of, it's part of it, but I think I'm gonna, remind me about the spitting when we get to the. Yes.
All of the persecution over the years too, it makes me think, I mean, trying to stay like under the,
Radar.
yeah, and, you know.
So we will talk about that, but just for context here, when you talk about people who use the word Kainahara or Kinahara, they're usually talking about their grandchildren. If you think about it, right? Or their own age. Someone shared a joke that I'll just repeat it briefly. It's an old grandmother who's called up to be a witness in court, and they say, the judge says, how old are you? He says, Kainahara, 97 years old. Right? Like, what is this word? And the joke keeps going. I'm just sharing, you know. But so we'll jump into this text number 7. And no, we'll come back to it. We'll come back to it though. All right, go for it.
When people commend the wisdom, wealth, family, etc. of others, they must bless them that they not be affected by the evil eye.
So for those of you who like literally take a peek into the Hebrew for a moment, it says Shalo Yishlot Bo, which means that it shouldn't be affected by Ayin Hara, the evil eye. Right. And again, like I mentioned, you talk about your good health, or you talk about financial something good that happened. You say, wow, I just had an amazing deal. Kainahara. Kainahara actually, and the poo poo poo, of course, as well. What are these words? We're saying that no evil eye here. That's literally what it translates to. No evil eye here. We're saying that we don't want the evil eye to affect this point that we just mentioned. So you talk about, you know, my child is doing so well in school. Kainahara. You talk about your, you know, someone else's, oh, they just bought a huge house. Kainahara, because you don't want the evil eye to affect them. And then I know you guys are saying the poo poo poo. A lot of Sephardic have a different thing. It's Ben Porat Yosef, which is the same concept. It says that Joseph was immune to the evil eye, so they're invoking his name. Again, these are, I think the proof is in the pudding, as they say, that even when we don't realize we're worried about it, we live it. We're constantly saying, you know, everything's great. No, we don't want an ayin hara. So in Hebrew, it's bli ayin hara. If you speak to some of your friends that speak Hebrew or grew up with parents that spoke Hebrew, they didn't say kainahara. They said bli ayin hara, which is the exact same translation. That's how you.
Right.
So if we're going to talk about a recap of everything that we've done until now, we have the evil eye and the curse are things that the majority of our Jewish texts would say are things that we have to be aware of. And so the question is, first of all, how does that work? How does it work that I can use my words or my gaze and actually affect someone in a negative way? Like what is the mechanism to it? And so we'll talk about 2 different kind of perspectives on that. And that's what we're going to jump into in just a moment. But before we read this next text, I just want everyone to keep in mind these 3 things that are on the screen as you're reading it. This is just for an analytical sense of how we'll recap it. So regardless of, they're also in your book on page 92. So if that's too small, but we're going to read a text, and while you're reading it, these are 3 things that you should try to have in mind. Number 1 is, what is bothering this author? That he's in how he writes and how he gives his answer. There's something bothering him. Number 2 is, how does he answer the question? And number 3, what is the explanation of the evil eye or curse that he says is not a correct explanation of how it works? So again, we are going to discuss now how they work. This text specifically talks about curses, but we're again, for all intents and purposes, the curse and the evil eye are hand in hand together. So text number 8, you get it. Again, while you're reading it, if you need a pause and want to kind of look at these questions again, I'm keeping them up there so you don't have to turn your page.
The explanation for the effect of the curse is as follows. God has great patience for all transgressors, both the righteous who transgress on occasion, as well as the wicked who transgress intentionally. This is operative at all times, aside from when God is indignant. When God's indignation is aroused, he is exacting in judgment and does not extend his characteristic patience. When people curse their fellows, this causes the cursed party's transgressions to be highlighted, and God doesn't maintain his patience for them. But if the subjects of the curse have no transgressions that make them worthy of punishment, the curse will indeed be completely ineffective.
So what is he saying it is not? I'm just jumping to that question, the third question. The first thing that he's saying is, this does not work the way we talk about. It's like, I'm going to curse you and something happens, like a fist. If I punch you, you get hurt. And so because I'm using that fist example and maybe in the recap, they're going to use that example, I'll call it the fist theory, like a punch. What he's saying is that's not what it means when you curse somebody. It is not like a punch. It's not like I say something and boom, it happens to you. Or if I look at you in that way with an evil eye, that's not what's happening. Rather, what is it? It's a spiritual process. It's a spiritual thing. And this is really his question. If we go back to that first question, what is bothering him? He says, if a person is cursed and we say therefore someone will be punished by God. It says either the person deserves it or doesn't. Right? If this is about God giving someone misfortune because I spoke or I looked at them in a bad way, in an evil way, where's the divine justice that I can do that? Either they deserve it or they don't. And if they don't deserve it, why should I be able to do that? So he therefore explains it differently. He says, actually, when you curse or you look at somebody with an evil eye, you're triggering a reaction in God's judgment system. So God, just to put this on the screen, God looks at this world in 2 different ways, and God deals with this world in 2 different ways. On the one hand, God is a merciful God, and so therefore God has a lot of patience. Maybe you did something wrong. Maybe you should really correct your ways, but God is not quick to actually punishing you for that. God says, listen, maybe in a month, maybe in 3 months, this person will fix it. And so I don't have to jump in and punish tit for tat, if I can use that word. Think about it as like a parent. You have a lot more patience with your child when they do something wrong. Whereas if you're a student and the teacher sees you do something wrong, it's like immediate. We gotta punish that child so others don't do it or whatever the reason is. But the point is that when a person switches to the divine justice side, or if God was using the judgment side, God's not being mean. This is for every cause, there is an effect. If I did something wrong, the effect is the actual, I'm going to say punishment or reward that God does for your action. So when God is using the merciful perspective and relationship, there's a lot more leeway. Someone might not be as deserving for things that they have in their life, for blessings that they have in their life. But God is compassionate. God is merciful. The curse triggers that God reviews that and says, wait a second, maybe this person doesn't deserve that beautiful home or whatever that person had cursed or used their evil eye for. So after a strict review of the person, 2 things will come out. Either the person is deserving of that and nothing happens, or the person is not deserving of that, and then God does not something mean or out of the ordinary, but God deals with that person the same way that they should based off of their actions. But like we mentioned earlier, the person who curses or uses the evil eye, that same judgment will happen on them as well, right? This is the boomerang that I talked about. I'll come back to. So all it does is it causes a review. It causes God to say, wait a second, let me check that. Let me go back and see, how are we taking care of Levi? Maybe I've been too kind. Maybe I've been giving him too much space and he's abusing that relationship. So his question regarding divine justice is now resolved. He's no longer worried about, wait, this isn't fair. Like, why should I? It does not, no, it has nothing to do with fair or not. It totally is fair. It's just that God was, I'm going to say, interacting with an individual in a very nice way and being very lenient and patient. And even though somebody might have done something that should have triggered a punishment of sorts, God didn't immediately punish because, listen, over time, the person might correct their ways. But after someone is cursed, God says, you know what, I'm reviewing that. That triggered a review process. It triggered an audit. It's like a whistleblower. If I were to use that, the dreaded IRS audit or something. It's like you thought it was all going well until someone now with a fine comb and starts looking at every line item. So this is his explanation to how a curse or the evil eye works. Right? The curse didn't do anything. The evil eye didn't do anything, but it triggered something. And God's reaction is based off of that. To go just a bit more, I'm going to say in depth, or maybe a bit more mystical and Kabbalistic on that, we're going to turn to text number 9, which is on page 94. This is the Zohar, who just gives us a bit of a deeper view on the evil eye's effects. But again, this is not a disagreement with what we read, just a little bit more perspective on it. So, again, page 94, text 9.
God operates on 2 levels, concealed and revealed. The revealed level is that of worldly justice, while the concealed level is the source from which all blessings emerge. As a result, all of the person's conduct that is concealed is saturated with blessing, and all of the person's conduct that is in the open is subject to strict justice. On this level, everything is subject to the evil eye.
So the Zohar also says that there are kind of 2 ways that God interacts with this world. There is the concealed and the revealed. The revealed way is kind of the way we all assume the world works. You do something good, there's a reaction for a reward. You do something not good, there is a reaction for a punishment or removing something good. So their thing is that there's a second level of this. This is the non-revealed, the concealed world. What is that? That is where God doesn't work on this system. God is the boss, and God can choose to not work within the laws of the natural way that he created the system. And so in the structured system, you do the right thing, you get a reward. You do the wrong thing, you get a punishment. But in the non-structured system, the system that we don't know how it works, this is the non-revealed system, God gives. So when you're I'm going to say the way he uses it, when everything is beneath the surface, when a person's conduct is not in the open, it's concealed, right? You're not outwardly showing the different blessings that you have. So God works with you in this non-strict system of justice. God goes beyond the rules. To use I think a good kind of example of this is you own the company. You made rules for all your employees, but you can sometimes go beyond that. So you have a structure. If you have an HR department, a new hire gets, I'm just looking at the McDonald's signs, they started going $20 an hour at some places, right? That's the structure that they've set up. But if they're in dire straits, they really need an employee, the CEO can say, listen, someone came through an interview and said, listen, I'm not doing it for 20, and okay, 25 it is. They can go beyond that. And so that's kind of the same way here. There is a process, there is a system, there are rules, there are laws, but God doesn't always work with those laws. God sometimes will bypass that. And so that's the non-revealed, that's the concealed way that God interacts with this world. And so when we look at our levels of engagement. How does God choose which way to engage? The Zohar gave that answer as well. The Zohar said it's based on our action. If I work in a way that is very flashy, very revealed, then God's interaction with us is the very same way. It's by a system. But if I work in a way that is private and not open, then God interacts with us in that very same way. It's not strict, it's full of blessings. It bypasses the system of, I'm going to use the word again, tit for tat. Every action has a reaction. And so according to this understanding, the evil eye is a zone. It's like, do I live in plain sight? Then I have the extra scrutiny. But if I am more modest, if I am more careful about what I show and the blessings that I have, then God doesn't worry. You don't have to worry about the evil eye. You don't have to worry about being in that zone because you are in a different zone where God interacts with you beyond those systems. So here he's saying is that the Zohar, this same text, can also be triggering, depending on how I act, will trigger how God reacts with us. So just to put this on the screen, you live the public life, God relates on an open, strictly regulated level. If you live the private life, then God relates on a concealed, unregulated level. So again, it's not a punishment. No one has caused anything beyond what a person was already intended to receive. But you can also skirt that and get much more than you were intended to receive by going beyond the system. And again, this goes back to the same theme that we talked about in the previous classes, which is that the Jewish belief is we can live beyond the system, right? There are systems. The world is full of systems. The zodiac, if we go back to astrology, we're not beholden to that, but we could be beholden to that. It's all about how we act. But knowing now all of this, the question is, how do I protect myself? So the evil eye does something. It can cause something. And a curse can cause something. Let's say someone curses me. What is the mechanism for me to protect myself? So one of the things we've already talked about, some of them, right? We talked about the Khamsa. But really, now that we understand the process, we can kind of understand the solution a little bit better. So of course, if the idea is that someone punched you, then obviously the fix is to block the punch, right? If the idea is that an evil eye has an automatic reaction that will hurt me, I need some sort of a mechanism to protect me. So if we go with what we call the fist, what are my mechanisms to protect myself? One of them is going to be this. Another one is going to be the red string. A third one might be just saying no evil eye should become of it. Spitting is to kind of denigrate ourselves.
Building a wall of immunity.
Of what?
Building a wall of immunity.
Building a wall of immunity. But you're saying that's with the spit or in general?
In general.
So again, Jewish tradition has a lot of, I'm going to say, examples of the first way, that we just do something as a defensive block. Of them, the Khamsa. Another one is an amulet. Anyone here familiar with amulets? It's like where they write something on it could be a parchment, it could be on a metal.
Yeah.
I remember someone once came to my dad and said their house has scorpions and they need an amulet for scorpions. That's not our thing, right? We said get a good pest control. Right? Sometimes there's a practical answer. But the point is that Jewish tradition does have, and so if you want to look on page 96, these are just some of those protective methods. The Khamsa is it's 5. Why is that something that wards off the evil eye? Anyone know?
Something about 5.
So one of the things, if you look, it obviously is clearly not so simple. People don't know why. But one of the reasons is the number 5 has, for some reason, a protection against evil. But
What
again,
language is
there,
Kamsa? What language?
I would assume like Aramaic or Arabic,
That's
You know,
interesting.
because it is from the Middle East and North Africa. That's where it comes from. Like you can see it in the text.
That's interesting that many cultures fit.
Yeah, so that was something that I actually was reading when I was preparing for this. So many cultures have the red string, for example, is not sourced in Judaism. But people are doing it, right? Meaning we're not the only people that are worried about this stuff. Yeah, I don't know if that's comforting or not. But the fact is that there are so many different people, and
If somebody's born on the fifth, do they have extra protection?
I don't know. I like the number. I'm a fan of the number 7. I'm just, I'm born on the 21st though. But I will tell you, I don't know the answer to that. If you're born, I think if we're gonna go back to knowing when you're born, we'll probably have to go back to last week's course and look at what's, what your sign is. There is something, of course, Judaism does have something in numbers, like the bris is on the 8th day, which is, of course, that's because God said so. But 8 is a number that is just beyond 7. 7 is the natural order of nature, right? 7 days in a week. The 8th is the day above nature. So the bond that we have with God through the circumcision is beyond nature. But again, I don't know if you're born on the 5th, if that means anything. But again, so wearing a red string is one of them, right? Again, is it Kabbalistic? I can tell you there are people making a lot of money off that string. Yeah,
Right.
and they say they did 7 times around Rachel's tomb. Have you ever heard that?
Yeah.
I mean, I've never seen anyone going around it.
Why don't they do that in the old city? They sell the
Well-
red.
Well, because
string.
people like you and me are gonna pay for it. That's why.
They give it away and you donate.
But
And
it-
say a prayer, but this says it said is effective. They haven't found it that it's effective. red
Right.
string.
Meaning there's no Jewish source. One of the things I like about this course is people can tell you anything you want. This is gonna be based off texts. So you could go to the biggest Kabbalistic expert who's really a rabbi and says the red string helps. Just ask him for a text that shows that. You won't find that. That's what they're saying. That's really what they're saying. In fact, what's very telling, interestingly, is that there is a commentary that says it is a pagan action. This is things that idol worshippers do.
Right.
But again, that doesn't mean that Jews aren't doing it. We're talking about, is there a source to it? But if we were being honest here, the point is that we all care and therefore we do things. Or we don't care and our parents did it, and so we just continue it. Yeah.
I went through this with my mother-in-law when I had a son, and in my mind, I always thought it was more the superstition part, but also because of like high infant mortality, and she wouldn't let me buy like anything before he was born and
Okay.
baby.
So-
all of that, but I really thought that it was more connected.
So let me ask you, because I know I also kind of have interchanged superstition in the beginning of the class. Do you look at superstition as an evil eye? As an evil eye? Well, where do the superstitions come from?
It is the evil eye.
It's the same.
That's why I'm asking. But it's like something, but instead of somebody doing it, it's just a known thing, right? That's how you're looking at superstition. The black cat, for example, right? So it's the black cat. If it walks in front of you, who provided that now curse to you?
It's all Wilbur monsters.
We're not getting into it. Yeah, we don't confuse us with the facts. I will tell you that of all these things, if you look at the last one, which is the Shir Hamalot, again, it didn't come from a Chabad thing, but it comes from Raziel Hamalach, which is a book. Raziel, the angel. He says that you should put this psalm as a method of protection for parents, for their mother, and for the newborn child to protect them from evil eye and witchcraft. That's in his book. But I will tell you that I have that tradition. But if you want to read something interesting, they quote, why is it our tradition not to ward off the evil eye, but to be surrounded with holy matters? The baby's first thing in the hospital should be surrounded by holy items. And I'll share something interesting. My mother-in-law, when she gave birth to my wife in Binghamton, in Lourdes Hospital, right? There's a cross in every room. And she knows that she wants to bring her daughter into a world of holiness, not of another religion. And so she was very concerned. And in those days, you didn't take down the cross. So she wrote into the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, if you have this Psalm 121 in the room where you're giving birth, you don't have to worry about anything. And so Connie gave birth to my oldest in that same hospital, but she wanted to give birth in the same hospital where she was born. And when she gave birth, they actually took down the cross, like without even asking. So, but we still had that regardless, had nothing to do with the cross. The idea is you want to be surrounded with holiness. You don't have to worry about the evil eye. You don't have to worry about the bad vibes or spirit. That's kind of what the Rebbe told her mother. It's like, don't worry about that. But you have this, you're bringing your child into a world that is now a room with holiness. Yeah.
T is for Torah.
T is for Torah.
No.
Yeah, you want to add something?
I was gonna say, I met a woman, I was in Vegas for a conference, and I met a woman, and she gave me this. To keep the evil out.
So hard. Again, but that means you believe it because you have it on you.
No, it's in my.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You still.
The little baby.
The Tehillim, right? There are people, I will tell you that, like in my car, we have a charity box and also more than that. I have a Siddur, a Chumash, like 5 books of Moses, the Tanya, and again, a charity box. So you've now made your car into like a little holy vehicle.
It
Yeah.
isn't really that she's superstitious.
Me?
There's a phrase in Jewish.
Okay.
It can't hurt.
Right. So I was gonna say err on the side of caution.
Yeah.
I always say err on the side of caution. It's kind of like the same thing. You want to do a mitzvah, it's like, oh, I'm not really into it. What do you have to lose? But before we take anything else, I know because so many people mentioned about the spitting, I just want to highlight it again. I know some of you already read it. Spitting serves as a protection against the evil eye. The act of spitting is intended to conceal the person's praiseworthy conduct and present a facade of negativity by degrading oneself. So you're saying, oh, I'm not so good. You know, you say, you're such an amazing person. I'm not so good. That's the same idea as spitting. And so therefore the evil eye won't attach itself to us. So I'm going to move along just so that we don't stay on one little detail here. When we talk about, this is all these things that we mentioned are only for one of the mechanisms, which if you remember, that author didn't like that mechanism. He didn't like to believe that the evil eye or the curse is actually something like a punch. So all of these things, in his opinion, are not necessary. His opinion was, and the way he explains it in the Zohar as well, is it's triggering an audit by God of how God works with you and interacts with you. So the answer is, if I am worthy of the blessings, if you remember, the evil eye doesn't affect itself because God does the audit and says, no, this guy is great. Deserves everything plus more, right? Hopefully. But the idea is so what would be the solution? What would be the way that we can ward off the evil eye or ward off a curse? It would be based on that theory. So we'll go to text number 10, Lynn.
If your mezuzah are kosher, and most importantly, your daily conduct is in accordance with Torah law, it is absolutely impossible for the evil eye to have any effect on you. On the most basic level, firmly resolving to align your daily conduct with the guidance of our living Torah and to observe the mitzvot about which we are told you will live with them is God's command. In addition, this is the path to receiving God's blessings in everything that you need.
So this was an answer to a woman who actually was worried about the evil eye. And he didn't say, go get a kamea or put a red string. He said, hey, let's do the tried and true proven path of bringing God's blessings, which is by doing mitzvot, doing something that God will give you blessings for. And one of the things that he highlights is the mezuzah. Why specifically a mezuzah? Because it says the mezuzah protects. So that's not something I think most of us know. We put up a mezuzah to protect our homes. It says God watches your home. So specifically make sure that that is Kosher and in order, yes.
So are you, is this saying if it's not kosher, it's not protected?
Okay, I love this question.
What was the question?
If it's not kosher, does that mean you're not protected? The way I will answer that is, it's like a helmet and a ballistic vest, right? You are going into a war zone, bullets are always flying. It doesn't mean a bullet is gonna hit you, right? The world is constantly happening. Things happen regardless of what we do. And so these are just added protections that if it was actually on target for me, I'm wearing that protection. That's kind of how I answer that. It's not because it's not kosher, I'm going to get hit. It's if I was going to get hit, I have a protective device.
Little extra film on it.
Yeah, yes.
Another layer.
Correct.
But it's still protected.
It is protecting. But so with that, another method of protection from the evil eye, like we mentioned in the Zohar, is privacy. So I want to just point out, we're going to jump into text 11 in just a moment. But this is based off of a story that it says the Jewish people are in the desert. They are moving right along, and there are nations that are afraid. It's like, wait, these people are going to take over our lands. They're going to destroy us. One of the kings, his name is Balak. He goes and he hires a non-Jewish prophet to curse the Jewish people. And when he's about to curse the people, he blesses them. So we'll read that text number 11, Janet.
How do you pronounce it? Balaam? Balaam?
However you pronounce it will be fine.
Balaam.
Bilam is Hebrew, but Balaam is probably how they do it in the English.
Raised his eyes and saw Israel dwelling according to its tribes. The Spirit of God rested upon him, and he proclaimed his message. How goodly are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel.
So what does he say? He says, he mentions the tents. So the Talmud looks at that quote and says, there's something going on about the tents. And what they explain is that when the Jewish people would camp in the desert, no two tent openings, no doors faced each other. So if I looked out, again, they didn't have windows, right? It was the door. If I looked out my door, I couldn't see into the next person's tent. The privacy, the modesty that they had in the way they lived. So he said, how goodly are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. And therefore, we'll read text number 12. Leslie, we'll go to you. This is a commentary on that, known as the Kli Yakar, is why he eventually praises them.
Balaam proclaimed, how goodly are your tents, O Jacob, because he saw that the entrances of their tents were not aligned opposite to each other, so that no one would be able to see into their fellow's tent and harm them with an evil eye. Balaam said to himself, I cannot curse them with an evil eye, because this is something they are so particular about themselves. The evil eye cannot affect people that live privately in their tents and don't flaunt themselves publicly.
So think about that. He said, he just adds something to what we already said. He realizes this is praiseworthy, but it's more than that. It's like, wow, there's nothing that I can do that will affect them. The way that they are living, this privacy, the way that they don't flaunt themselves publicly, I can't do anything. There's no way that the evil eye can attach itself to something. So when he saw how careful they were, he couldn't curse them. So what are the practical lessons we can take from that? If we're careful about our privacy, then other people's jealousy won't be able to really affect us. But I want to share, this is a video that they put on, I'm going to move out of the way for it, that talks about more than, today when we talk about privacy, it's so different because of social media and the internet. So I will.
Do you have someone in your pocket? I bet you do. That usually refers to having strong influence over someone. But I'm referring to something else. With social media, we have many people in our pockets, at least digitally. With devices small enough to carry wherever we go, we communicate instantly. Kids update their parents, relatives pay remote visits. We support, nurture, issue an advisory, forward a shopping tip, ask for ideas, join a conversation, make someone's day, or just say hi. With social media, we can admire a new arrival, celebrate success, offer inspiration, and invite endless friends into our private vacation. We can even join a dinner without consuming a carb. So yes, social media delivers your social world into your pocket and delivers you into other people's pockets. But like all things stored in pockets, it's easy to get carried away. When we think we are connecting with those we care about, we can actually be negatively affecting some of them. That's because each person has their own successes and failures, good times and bad. You might be feeling on top of the world, but someone else is at the bottom. You might feel like you've made it, while someone in your audience feels like they'll never. Think about it. You move into your dream home and want to share your excitement. But how might that make someone struggling to keep their cramped quarters feel? You capture a hilarious video of your boisterous brood and are itching to share the joy. How might someone desperate for just one react internally to that? Your perfect relationship pose has been captured digitally. You're proud to post. How might that be taken by someone whose self-image has been worn down to the bone by a difficult relationship? The ideal vacation includes posting manicured images of its highlights. What might that do to the emotions of someone who dares not hope? You're in dazzling attire. Why not reap some online admiration? What might that mean to someone struggling with their body image? So, is there anything wrong with sharing proud, cute, and memorable moments? Not at all. But here's a dose of wisdom that might help strike a balance. You see, modesty has traditionally been a trademark Jewish value, and its basic ideas run something like this. Not everything has to be shared. Privacy makes an experience more meaningful, not less. Not everything shared publicly has to be shared completely. Consider whether what you share will arouse jealousy. Estimate in advance how individuals might react internally to what you display or disclose. Will they feel delighted or dismayed, enlightened or depressed, inspired or deflated? Put yourself in their sandals for a moment. So, before sharing your next slice of your life, you might want to ask yourself, am I sharing an important update or am I flaunting? Will this make people genuinely happy for me? Or will it invite jealousy and resentment? How many images or posts of this do I really need to upload? Is it realistic or a heavily manicured impression of reality? So it turns out that having people in your pockets is not enough. We've got to have them in mind too.
That is a lot of things to think about, by the way, because I don't think the answer necessarily is to shut down Facebook, but on the other hand, how do you use it, or Instagram, or whatever handle or social media avenue you use? And on the other hand, there are certain things, just to talk about charity for just a moment, there's always this age-old debate. Do you put your name in public when you give charity or not? And there is, of course, the idea the greatest method of charity is privately. On the other hand, if it encourages somebody else, then there's a reason to do it publicly. And so I think it's really about finding a good, healthy balance. And I know that one of the things that it's newer for me. It's like, a lot of people put pictures of their children, and it's not even about protecting people so they don't know who your children are, but like, what about that person who's in your circle who can't have a child or is struggling? So there are a lot of things to consider when we post things or when we talk about things. But it's a lot of food for thoughts. Any thoughts on that? Yeah.
Somebody I know used to always say they have their Facebook life and their real life.
Yes, and there are a lot of people like that, right? You see someone posting this beautiful, happy married life, and then they get divorced the next day. And that's something that you really see. I remember reading something maybe in the last couple of weeks, and I thought it was interesting. It caught my eye. It said a rare glimpse. It was some celebrity, but they took a picture of themselves, and there was a rare glimpse of their house, meaning no one has ever seen their house. And the picture that they took showed their dining room. I thought that was pretty impressive, right? Now, I'm not talking about the dining room, but the idea that here's somebody who's in the public eye and no one has really seen their house. And I'm sure it was a nice house. So it's just an interesting, again, they're doing a balance probably for privacy, not because of flaunting, is more about stalkers, who cares, whatever the reason is. But if we jump into text number 13, Hannah, we're up to you.
Blessing is found only in a matter of concealed from the eye.
So when we keep our blessings private, they flourish. When we flaunt them unnecessarily, we're just inviting extra scrutiny. It doesn't mean that it's going to be taken away, but other people could be jealous and as a result develop those negative feelings. And that could in turn attract that extra divine scrutiny. And that's why privacy has always been an important Jewish value. So the question again, this is not something to answer, but just for food for thought. How can I incorporate the Jewish value of privacy into my life? Good question, right? Okay, so we talked about the idea of all the negative. Right? We talked about how we can use our words to curse somebody. We can use our eyes to have a negative effect on somebody. What about using them for positive blessings, looking at somebody favorably? So that is what we will turn to in text number 14. David.
Rabbi Elazar, in the name of Rabbi Janina, never consider the blessing of an ordinary person unimportant. We know of two people, leaders in their respective generations, who received blessings from ordinary people, and the blessings were fulfilled, David and Daniel. David was blessed by Aruna.
The Hebrew words, so read it however you want.
Okay, as it is written, and Aruna said to the king, may your God favor you. Daniel was blessed by Darius, as it is written, your God whom you continually serve will deliver you.
So we have the Talmud telling us that the words of blessings, even when they come from the most simple of people, should be regarded as important. And the two examples that they give are King David, with, by the way, the Hebrew word for that, I know the English doesn't, it's spelled differently, is Aravna. He was a non-Jewish person. He came from a tribe of Yevus, or the Jebusites. And when King David purchased the Temple Mount, he actually purchased it from them. So at that time, he has this interaction. There is a plague going on with the Jewish people. 70,000 Jewish people had already died. And so he blessed him. God should favor you. And immediately he favors him. There's no more plague. It's 2 verses later that says, and God was entreated on behalf of the land, and the plague on Israel was halted. The second one is Daniel, who is in exile, if you're familiar with him being thrown into the lion's den. So in Daniel's story, what is the story? There are people who do not like that the king likes him. Jewish guy, he's not like us. And so they make all these rules with the king's blessing because they have the intent of catching Daniel. What are the laws that they make? You cannot pray or make requests of any god or any power other than the king. And of course, Daniel prays to God. And so the ministers tell the king, you got to keep your rules. And so the king says, you're right, I have to. But before he throws him into the lion's den, he blesses him. He doesn't want to do it. So what does he do? So just a quote, he says, your God whom you continually serve will deliver you. And sure enough, we know. The rest is history. He is indeed delivered. So this is about blessings. What about looking at people with a good eye? Does that have a positive effect? So that's text number 15, page 103.
When you look at your fellows with a good eye, you give them blessings and you also receive blessings yourself. The verse states, a person who has a generous eye will be blessed. And using alternate vocalization, this can also be read as will bless.
Okay, so to use the screen to show you how that works. Again, in the Torah, there's no vowels, right? So we have the way that we'll read it, but the way that you can also read it if you change around the vowels. So properly vowelized, when it's done correctly, it is yivorach, will be blessed. So a person who has a generous eye, someone who looks at people favorably, will be blessed. But when you change the vowels, it would be yivarech. And yivarech means will bless. So if I look at somebody favorably, first of all, literal meaning of the verse is I will be blessed. But looking at someone favorably will also bless them. Will also give them positive blessing. So it's a win-win situation. The person who looks favorably upon the other person, he is blessed or she is blessed, and the person that they are looking at is also blessed. So now when we talk about the evil eye and how they work their harm, we also see the reverse effect. You can have a positive effect with your eye and with your power of using your mouth. So here are a collection, page 104, just to quickly skim through some of it. A collection of texts regarding the importance and efficacy of giving and receiving blessings. So again, the first one is, for those who bless him, the poor person will inherit the land, and those who curse him will be cut off. It should have said those who bless them in the plural. Why did it say him? Because it says God himself comparing blessing a person to blessing God. You have people mention praise of their fellows. Again, I'm going to quickly skim through this because it's more than just a text on that. But really, people who mention the praise of their fellows, whether it's for their wealth, appearance, children, they should bless them repeatedly. Why? Because Moses did that. Today you are as numerous as the stars of the heavens. And immediately he blessed them again. Who has the power to bless? So you would think it's the righteous, the scholars. The fact is, maybe they'll have more efficacy in their blessings, but it does say in the verse in Psalms that the blessing, that you should listen to the blessings of those who are poor. Here's the text, because God listens to the poor. If God listens, we for sure should. Also, a parent's blessing is quite effective. Why? Because they bless with their heart and soul. And then, is it effective and why? So this is where I'll just share off script. But one of the things that we talk about is God gives us the divine spirit. And so speech is technically a source that comes from God. Right? It says that God breathed into the nostrils of the human the soul of God. So our speech has great power. Again, you can read through those more in depth. But basically, this is a potential that we all have. And we just have to, it's so easy to bless people and say nice things. We just have to tap into that. And we have the ability. So why not use it? Activate those blessings. We'll end off on text number 16, which is about this idea of the tradition of blessing.
The Baal Shem Tov taught that a blessing given by a close friend is more influential in heaven and more likely to achieve its desired effect than the angel Michael's intercessions and pleas for mercy.
So who is this angel Michael, for those of you who read it in the Hebrew, or Michael? Who is this angel? This angel is known for mercy and blessings. We talk about the angel Michael actually in the Yom Kippur service, where each angel stands in God's throne. But his role in general was something that we'll talk about, and angels in general will be in next week's lesson. But what he's saying is that if you give a sincere blessing, because you truly care about someone, you truly wish something on someone else, we have more power than the angels. And so today what we're saying is you have the power of your eyes, the power of your lips that can be used for the negative, but we have the antidote to that, living a private life, doing mitzvot. These are our antidotes. But on the positive side, that same eye and that same lip or speech can be the greatest blessing to others. And by default, the boomerang, it helps you as well. So we have the opportunity to use these things wisely, and it's all about what we choose to do. Here is the recap of the video. of the class. And again, I'll send out a recap as well. Side note, before I put that on, we have two upcoming events, or really one event on February 3rd. I'm going to put in the email that is specifically Havdalah Night Out, if you didn't see that email, but you can look out for
Lesson 3. Lesson 3. Jinx and the Evil Eye. 1. There is strong support in Jewish sources for the notion that the evil eye and curses can have damaging effects. However, this is not unanimous. 2. The most prominent Jewish theory for explaining the effects of evil eyes and curses is that they attract added scrutiny to us and trigger a review of whether we are indeed worthy of our blessings. God's judgment is just at all times, and no evil eye or curse can strip us of something we truly deserve. 3. The most effective way to protect ourselves from curses and the evil eye is through being more private. When we live modestly and don't unnecessarily flaunt our blessings, we avoid scrutiny of our worthiness, and we develop a relationship with God that is personal and intimate, rather than correct and formal. 4. Our words and eyes have power. When we look at others favorably and wish them blessings, this has a real positive effect for us and them.
All right. So next week, do we believe in angels and demons? Is there other intelligent life out there in the universe? Can we communicate with the souls of our deceased loved ones? And so we will explore the Jewish teachings next week.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.